tuning into Roll Call. The movie you selected is Enemy of the State, starring Will Smith.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to Roll Call. Make sure before this episode starts, you make sure that you are not being bug tapped or wired. Little do we know, we may not have much of a choice in that say. This is the show where two childless millennials are going to gush over movies and follow an actor's journey from their early years throughout their blockbuster hits.
Yes, because let's face it, we're all just chasing, running through the street barefoot in our robe to get to the blockbuster to make sure we can go and rent Enemy of the State for the weekend.
We are climbing out of hotel
Hotels.
windows. We are pulling out all the stunts. We're gonna get lit on fire for this one. We're gonna do all the high chase stunts.
New definition of it's lit.
Oh, goodness gracious.
But what's up, everyone? I'm Bria, and I too would make all the exceptions in the world for Janet Jackson and, dare I say, Lisa Bonet.
Well, Bria, I would just like to say that you are the only woman in this world for me. Well, you and Janet Jackson, and probably Lisa Bonet and Regina King.
Oh my God, see, now that just contradicts what you said. You're lying to me. No, I mean, those women are just, I mean, I could add tons more too. Beyonce, Doja Cat, Meg Thee Stallion, J-Lo.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But in today's episode, we're chatting about none other than Will Smith in the 1998 political thriller the 1998 political thriller action film Enemy of the State. So, let's take a trip back to November 1998 and let's get into some pop culture. So, oh my God, 98, like 97, is just one of those years so much happened. So much so that it was hard for me to like narrow it down. I found a lot of this stuff on Billboard. They have like this timeline pretty much of like the whole year and like stuff month by month. So there's some stuff specifically to November, but there's some stuff that I was just like, some of this stuff is kind of full circle. So we got two full circle-ish moments here. Snoop Dogg leaves Death Row Records in 98, which he just recently bought the rights to in 2022. So full circle moment there. Notably, he left post Tupac's death and all the stuff with Suge Knight. So crazy that now he owns Death Row.
That's a power move.
Posh Spice and David Beckham get engaged in January of 98. Their oldest son, Brooklyn Beckham, just got married this month, so we old. Like,
oh my God.
Brooklyn's definitely younger than us, but
yeah.
If he probably wasn't even born in the 90s if they just got married or engaged in 98. So
yeah.
Damn. In some savory, this was just, I think this is general pop culture, but I just know too that in Black circles in the Black community, this was like Toni Braxton, diva extraordinaire, super talented, files for bankruptcy, and that was just like, what? That alongside with like TLC, lots of MC Hammer jokes, but I think Toni Braxton and more so TLC's bankruptcy opened the window into the shadiness of record contracts, and that these celebrities aren't making millions of dollars and then just blowing it. They're in these situations where, you know, they think that they're selling Toni Braxton #1, songs, records. They're selling all these records and making all this money, but then they owe their record company for fronting all that money. And we didn't know that. We just thought they were buying too many Gucci silverware. And if you have not watched her Oprah interview, that is, I won't say it's good in the sense that it's like good, but it's actually kind of like really shitty how Oprah interviews her about it. But yeah, classic controversial interview. But on a high note, later that year, Toni Braxton went on to become the first Black Belle in Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. So she wound up bouncing back career-wise from that bankruptcy issues, but just a classic moment. I think I've said this before, but TRL premieres in 1998. And so I have a little TRL update. Carson Daly was dating Jennifer Love Hewitt for a year, and then he found out on the radio that they were no longer a couple.
That's a shitty way to break up.
Especially Howard Stern, of all people. Like,
Ugh.
how crappy is that? Speaking of theaters and Broadway, Mulan hits theaters, which I didn't know was the jumpstart of Christina Aguilera's recording career with Reflection. That was her first hit single, and that is what led her to her recording contract. So, no clue. I thought she was just, part of the machine.
Yeah, I thought that at that point that her first album had already come out. I mean, I knew Reflections was on that first album.
Yeah, so she signs with RCA, and then the following year is when her first album comes out. So, no clue. Speaking of legendary music, Frank Sinatra passes away in 98, and I feel like that's just a little nugget of perspective in terms of, like, we're getting all this new, like, millennial content, but then we have, like, very notable classic legends who are still alive but also leaving us.
Yeah.
So we have a number one hit with Lauryn Hill's Doo-Wop That Thing. We did talk about the miseducation of Lauryn Hill last time, and I was just like, that's an opus. It's an amazing album, which it is. But I did not really know this fact about this song. So this is the first female rap artist to top the chart without any other billed artists, like any other features. And not until 2017, we didn't have another until Cardi B with Bodak Yellow.
Holy shit! That's a long time to hold that record.
Right? So, legendary for many other reasons, but that, I was like, whoa, I learned something today. In other hip-hop news, A Tribe Called Quest announces their plans to break up. Love Tribe Called Quest. And then, Billboard, they had to close out 98 with some Will Smith news. Will Smith releases the $2 million music video for Welcome to Miami. $2 million. Like, I've seen that video. I'm wondering where that $2 million went, but
all the shiny pants.
The driving up and down South Beach. And also in Will news, Jaden Smith was born in 98 in July, on July 8th. He's like his little 4th of July trophy baby. But so I have some pictures of Will here. He's on the cover of tons of magazines. I feel like this is just going to be a segment from now on with him. I think it's just amazing to me for a man and a Black man to be like, so I guess promoted on these things. Like, I expect it with J-Lo and just women in general, because women tend to buy into magazines and whatnot more. So seeing Will on the cover of Nickelodeon magazine in March of 98, so cool. He's on the cover of Rolling Stone. That interview is interesting. Might have to talk about that in another episode. And then he's on the cover of Jet, of course, for Enemy of the State. They have the picture of him running in his drawers and in the robe on the cover. And then I thought this was cool. On the inside, there's a story about Tatiana Ali going to Harvard and the start of her music career. There's a picture of her and Will with a plaque for her single Daydreamin', which went gold. And I didn't know that she was signed to his production company for music. So that was cool. And then we have the top albums in Jet. We have Mr. Beyonce Knowles Carter, Jay-Z, Jigga Man. Volume 2, Hard Knock Life is number one, which, Hard Knock Life was one of those songs as a kid that
Yes.
because a kid is on it, you just like automatically are just like, and
Yeah,
it's like,
this song automatically appeals to the kids of sampling that little bit from the musical Annie. So it's
Yeah.
like that is recognizable to kids, relatable to adults. It's a great song. That's on my pool party playlist.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill totally makes sense. Outkast's Aquemini, which sparked the amazing track Rosa Parks.
Yes.
Soul of a Woman, Kelly Price. That's a deep R&B cut for you guys. And then number 5, I know I said this last time, but Kirk Franklin did something for gospel music. The New Nation Project, which I believe this one is the one that has Stump on it. Just an amazing gospel act and album. And then we have the top 20 singles and Deuce top 5. My Little Secret, Escape, classic, but very trifling song. How Deep Is Your Love, Drew Hill. If you play that song, like I'm immediately, because the opening line is just Siskel, yeah, which is also a song on the Rush Hour soundtrack, which is another like big movie around this time. Lately by Divine. I don't think I know that song. Doo Wop That Thing. Wow. It's funny because Billboard Doo Wop That Thing's number 1, and then in Jet Magazine they're like number 4. It's a little Lauryn Hill song. But The First Night by Monica, another bop.
Don't get down on the first night. I should
how do you make a bop about like not having a one night stand?
And
so
she
hard,
was
like,
a teenager when she
Yes.
wrote that song.
and this is also the era of The Boy Is Mine.
Yes.
It's on this album, and it's on Brandy's Never Say Never album, which, just amazing.
Yes.
But yeah, I love Monica.
Me too.
And then I have a picture of Will with his son Trey at the VMAs accepting an award because there are 2 very iconic women behind him. Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston present him this award.
They must have been together that year for Miracles,
For
right?
Prince of Egypt?
Yes.
Yes. But if you don't know, this iconic VMA moment is like this skit about them being divas, and they both come out and they're wearing the same dress. And so they like rip off, or Mariah Carey rips off like one part to shorten her dress. And like, look, no problem. And so I put this because this is another kind of full circle moment because Meg Thee Stallion and Dua Lipa just did this with Donatella Versace. So I was like, oh my God, we're just really, rinse, cycle, repeat. So in November of 1998, Enemy of the State comes out alongside some pretty classic movies. We have A Bug's Life, which we talked about with comparison to Ants, but classic Pixar movie. And then I Know What You Did Last Summer. Oh, I Still Know What You Did. Sorry. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Because
the sequel already by 98. Yes. Okay.
And this sequel has Brandy. Brandy was like on the rise, baby. Oh, and Moesha is on the air by now. I saw her on the cast on the cover of Jet when I was looking for Wills. So like Brandy's on the rise. And The Water Boy with Adam Sandler, another classic. Bobby Boucher, just rent free in our heads. Mama said.
Medulla oblongata.
And then, I don't know if this is an error, but a movie called Watching a Movie, there's no poster for it, so absolutely no clue what this is. This is the only movie I don't recognize in this month, but, And on that note, how much money did this movie make for Big Willie? Oh, right.
Well, Enemy of the State was released November 20th. It is rated R for violence and language. Was produced or released through Touchstone Pictures, produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, directed by Tony Scott of Top Gun fame. And the overall budget of Enemy of the State was an estimated $90 million, which makes sense when we are going to break down this star-studded cast, but all of the stunts and action sequences, I can see where the money went to. Because sometimes we'll watch a movie and be like, where'd that money go? I don't know. Opening weekend, this movie made roughly just a little skosh over $20 million. But overall in US and Canada, it grossed $111.5 million, and total domestic worldwide was $250.8 million.
Well, I mean,
a cha-ching back in the bank.
Can he not make? I mean, yes, we know that now, but in the 90s, it was like probably just like, damn, he just keeps on winning. Like,
yeah. You know who did like this movie though, Bria?
Who?
Was our good friend House of Lil Rajay. You want to guess how many stars?
Well, if he said he liked it, then I'm teetering in the 3. I don't think it's a 4, but the 3 zone.
Correct. Lil Raj gave this 3 stars. So we have a Siskel and Ebert review. They had a cute little, it wasn't like a full show, but maybe it was a little show, and they would like publish this or show this, you know, like after Good Morning America sometime in the morning when people are just kind of like starting their day or getting ready for the weekend, and they would usually review like the 4 big movies that might have been coming out this weekend. So they also, in addition to reviewing Enemy of the State, talked about A Bug's Life, Celebrity, and Walking Dead Devine. But I'll start with Roger Ebert's overall general review of this first before I go into the Siskel and Ebert video review of it. Roger gives this 3 out of 4 stars. Overall, he really enjoys that this movie drew a lot of references to The Conversation, which was a 1974 Francis Ford Coppola film that also starred Gene Hackman, whose character was nearly identical. So in kind of the light of like Steven Soderbergh's Out of Sight comparisons and stuff, he really compares this movie a lot to The Conversation. And it was a movie that was also based off of like the government's listening to us, wiretapping and things like that. He really didn't mind that the movie was too fast-paced. This movie has a running time of 2 hours and 12 minutes, and for me that felt kind of long. I felt the true 2 hours, but Lil Raj thought that the movie was fast-paced and that movies have come a long way since movies like The Conversation had come out, because we have the new technology adaptation to it. Just a couple of months prior to reviewing Enemy of the State, he had kind of scoffed at a review of a movie. It wasn't Armageddon, but it was something similar to it, where he was poking fun at like scanning technology systems and being able to look at CCTV footage of a license plate and being able to like digitize it and pull up a license plate. But then he realized that you can just go to, this is before Google Earth, of course, but you can go onto a website, a 1998 website called terraserver.microsoft.com, where he was able to see the rooftop of his house and also see his own license plate of his car that was parked in his driveway. So he's like, you know what? This movie really made a believer of me in terms of what technology is capable of. And then in that sense, it scared him. So I think that this movie had that believability of a viewer of, oh shit, the government can and will watch us whenever they want to, and whatever the reason, they don't need to really have a reason for that. So he does say that by and large, this movie generally works, that the standoff at the edge or standoff at the end was kind of edging towards the realm of ridiculousness. But unfortunately, in his review, and even in the one with Siskel, he doesn't really talk too much about Will Smith's performance, but gives a lot of praise to Gene Hackman, who at that point had already really made himself and established himself in Hollywood, whereas Will, you know, definitely is nothing to scoff at that point, has good films under his belt, and has proved himself very capable and able as an actor. So I wish that he was able to talk a little bit more about that, but talks more about like Jon Voight and Gene Hackman in his review. Now, in the Siskel and Ebert video that's out there on YouTube, it's just so cute to see this two guys get together and talk about film. But overall, they found that while watching the movie, they did enjoy the scariness of the government being able to track and watch you and listen to you at all times, and that throughout the film that they cared more about the issue that really fuels the story, and that leaving the theater, they almost no longer felt safe, and said that this movie could really drive that conspiracy theorist over the edge of like, see, I told you so. I told you that they were listening, you know, kind of to the point of Regina King's character of I told you that they were listening, and who's going to be watching the people that watch us to make sure that they're not overstepping their boundaries. The only thing that they did mention was that since this movie is so fast-paced and so jumpy and skippy around in frames and shots, that's just generally Tony Scott's method of directing. It's very similar to how he's done other films, but he said the characters were so hyperactive that they felt that they needed to be injected with some kind of Ritalin to calm themselves down. But I think that's just old guys being like, this movie was fast and it had a lot of techno gizmos in there, which was really interesting to me. And this movie is really going to appeal to a generation of kids who are grown up on the computers.
Cut everything else and just keep that. Oh, that's so funny.
So this movie does have appealability to the older generation, but Bria, how many pumps of butter would you give Enemy of the State?
I might go high with this. I might give this 4. I think, too, like you with Independence Day, this is the Will Smith movie that I have a good memory of. And part of me is like, is this a real memory? Because it kind of makes no sense. But, you know, I'm going to go with it because this is what I think happened. But Rugrats, the movie, came out, and I really wanted to see that. And I notoriously, if you listen enough to the episodes, have not seen a lot of movies in theaters. I tend to have found out about movies on TV more than anything. But I remember as a kid being like, I loved the Rugrats, was obsessed with them, so I had to have, like, made a stink about going to see this movie, and my dad took me. But the movie had already kind of started, and I guess he made a stink of it because he's one of those dudes who, if he can get a deal or get, like, some kind of comp, he's gonna get it. So he was like, hey, like, the movie already started, blah, blah, blah. Or I don't know if we just snuck into any Enemy of the State, but this was the first time I saw movies back to back too. But so we saw Rugrats and then we saw Enemy of the State, which why would you take, like, how old was I in 98? I was 6. So why would you take a 6-year-old? But I mean, hey, he was like, look, you got a movie, I'm gonna get a movie. Like, and so I remember seeing this in theaters, and so when I would, it's not always on TV, but when I would see it on TV, I'd be like, oh, like, and I think it birthed my love of kind of like thriller movies where the first time you watch it, you probably don't get it, and then you watch it again, and you're like, oh, that's wild, I didn't catch that, or like stuff like that. Also, the Spy Kid in me just... This does something to me. Like, I just love, like, I was in my Spy Girl bag as a kid. Like, 007, Spy Kids, Agent Cody Banks, like,
Harriet the Spy,
like, all the, and then on top of that, growing up with computers, you know, pretending that you're, like, hacking into, it's just so much of it just is just like, yes, like, yeah. So this one skews high for me, so it's a 4 for me, dog.
Oh, okay. I like that. And I forgot to mention, but in this movie debuted number 2 behind the Rugrats movie. So Rugrats movie topped Enemy of the State.
See, that has to be a real story then, because I didn't even know that. So I'm glad I got that right. It'd be funny if, like, Bria, the Rugrats movie came out like a year later.
Oh, no. When I was looking up, like, facts around the movie and stuff, they were saying that the producers were, like, a little disappointed that it came behind a kid's movie. But, like, that's the buying power of millennials, bitch.
Yes, like my dad. You take your kid to see the the kid movie, and then
Mm-hmm.
hopefully maybe you could squeeze in Enemy of the State.
I could just imagine 6-year-old you with some extra popcorn and being like, just taking it all in because there's so much technology. And honestly, for me, this movie was, I had to really pay attention. And I don't want to say for the first time because that's going to make me sound like I have a problem, but I was stone cold sober when I watched this. And I would look down for like 2 seconds to write something down and look up and be like, he's on fire? What? I feel like you really have to pay attention. So kudos to 6-year-old you that's just trying to take it all in.
I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but I just think it made an impression on me in so many ways. Like I remember like this scene where he is trying to get the device from his kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember like in my mind like cosplaying that in the back of our Pathfinder. Like oh, can I sit in the back, Mom? Like in the very
and
back of the
pretend
truck.
you're having a conversation and
So, and I mean, hell, that like device thing is like a competitor to the Game Boys
Yes.
that had not did well, and so like my Game Boy being like secret device, like
every time you would slip a new game in there, you're like, oh, this has secret footage on here.
like just that childhood like imagination, and you see something in a movie and you're like, oh, we gotta play. Not cops and robbers, but like Enemy of the State, like, or Men in Black. Like, that's why the toys did so well. Hell, they could have made toys for this bitch. I would have asked for them.
Yeah.
But, and like repurposing your toys to play along, like, yeah, just so like pretending to find bugs in like, oh, they've tapped us. Like, I don't know. It's just...
Yeah, you find a little piece of like candy in your pocket and you're like, oh, it's a bug I've been listening to.
But yeah, so just super fond. What did you think of the trailer?
The trailer. Okay, but before I do, I will also say I agree with Lil Raj on this one. I'm gonna give this.
Sorry.
It's okay, no worries. I give this one 3 pumps of butter. Only because it felt long to me and I had to work really hard to concentrate on everything. I think that this movie might have benefited to just be cut down maybe by 20 minutes, not by much. There were some chase scenes that just were drawn out for really, really long. And it also just like how he was able to evade the FBI. But I kind of liked that part too of he's, Will Smith's character is a lawyer and he's not someone who necessarily works for the government. And so for his character to have been able to outsmart the NSA and those creepy dudes that watch us behind our computer screen. So hi to the FBI agents that are listening to us
and all
today.
My devices. Amazon associated.
Hello, Jack Black. Thanks for listening to me. Hi, Seth Green. Hi, Jamie Kennedy. So
Gary Busey's son.
Yeah. So I would give this 3 just because it felt a little long, but the plot was investing. I really liked the action. I liked the dualability that we see from Will Smith in this movie. I felt like the action pack of this movie was different from comparing to the last 2 big action ones of Men in Black and Independence Day. So, but let's talk about the trailer. So one of the most classic trailers starts off, kind of gives the audience a little, it's a fun, interesting tease where maybe it's the red herring where it makes you think that this movie is about one thing, but it's actually about something else. So the classic trailer that you'll see for Enemy of the State is starts off in the scene where it's Christmas. Will Smith is shopping for his family, and he pops into a lingerie store looking for something to treat his wife with. And so the whole kind of first 30 seconds of the trailer is this awkward conversation he has with an employee who apparently just wear lingerie in the lingerie store. This is like Victoria's Secret on naked steroids.
Yeah, I
And
wrote that. I was like, this is the most male fantasy lingerie store to have ever existed besides Victoria's Secret. Because
exactly.
these chicks who are sales associates in this store are not just peddling the goods to you, they're wearing them. So
They
like,
model it for
yeah,
you.
so she's talking to him and he's like kind of looking at her, like trying to gauge, like, she's like, oh, what size is she? And he's like, well, and then, like, you know, for reference. And I'm just like, oh, this is such a man's like idea.
Totally. It was like Frederick's of Hollywood. Do you remember that store?
Oh, yeah.
That was like we could go into Victoria's Secret, but we were not allowed to go into Frederick's. It was too risque. But anyways, after that, then we see that there was a switcheroo moment. A character played by Jason Lee bumps into Will Smith in the store, drops something off in his bag, and then now all of a sudden Will Smith is under investigation and he doesn't necessarily know why. So the rest of the trailer kind of cuts forth where we meet some of the other characters played by Lisa Bonet and Gene Hackman and Jon Voight. And so that's essentially the whole plot. And I like how the trailer doesn't necessarily give the ending away. I felt like the ending was a good surprise of like, oh, that's how they're going to tie that story plot back in. So I liked that they left the mob stuff out of it and kind of left that up to the imagination. So I would give this trailer an A+ if I was grading it.
Yeah. I feel like it's hard to go wrong with action trailers. You know what you're getting into, and I feel like unlike some other movies, like people aren't super critical of action trailers, you know, where they're like, oh, it gave away the big jokes like in a comedy. It's like, oh, I saw the big explosion already. Like, nah, it's gonna hit different when you get in the theater and you see how it, you know, you arrive to that big explosion or why he's running or, you know, how it all ties together. Or like, you know, when people are like rom-coms, like, oh, it was really cheesy. Like, what the fuck did you expect? Like, oh, you know, there's so many explosions and it was just so fast. Like, it's an action movie. Like, so, yeah, this one is good. And I want to talk about this, which maybe could become a thing. I saw on TikTok, Hey, I'm Bobby. She's amazing. She does pop culture and movie stuff. But she was talking about the tropes in movie posters. And I never realized a ton of them. And No More Late Fees, they've done a few with like rom-com movie posters where like everyone's leaning against each other and all these different posters. But one thing that Hey, I'm Bobby pointed out was these kind of movies usually have like this blue digitized aspect to them. And so Enemy of the State is definitely one of those movies where like the trailer has like this blue tint to some of it, and the action sequences and all the like the little Morse code sounds of of the computer. So that just also like extra serotonin. Like
totally. Well, some people label this as a subgenre of action movie and they call it a techno action film because the like your backdrop, what you have, that overview, or not overview, what's the word I'm thinking of, like the filter of blue that's over it almost looks as if we're looking at them through CCTV footage.
I can't wait to make this collage, by the way.
It's going to be all greens and blues. And we continue to see that like up until The Matrix definitely is one of those movies. But this movie is also told, you know, through the perspective of a lot of pieces of technology. It's not really through the eyes of someone else, but it's through the eyes of gadgets and gizmos and wires and
whatchamacallits.
and dingle hoppers and thingamabobs, you know. I got 20, but there's I like that this era of action film that we get, that's so, I think, perfectly iconic to this era of time that we get on the cusp of the millennium, adapting technology and really seeing all of what we have as humans ready at our fingertips.
So, Simone, would you like to summarize a little bit of Enemy of the State?
You got it. I didn't write this down. Robert Clayton Dean, played by Will Smith, is a mild-mannered lawyer who works in Washington, D.C. He's on the trail of a kingpin named Polly Pintero. Meanwhile, a politician named Thomas Bryan Reynolds, played by Jon Voight, is negotiating with Representative Philip Hammersley about a new surveillance system with satellites. This would allow the government to spy more on its people, but Hammersley declined. Reynolds knows that Hammersley is the only one standing in front of him to pass this bill, so he hires his team to kill Hammersley and cover it up to make it look like an accident or a potential suicide. Little do they know, the murder is caught on tape, and the taper is chased by Reynolds' team of NSA agents. That character is played by the one and only Jason Lee. The guy must ditch the tape, so he plants it on Dean. They end up bumping into each other while he's on the chase of the NSA team. They bump into each other at the lingerie store. Unbeknownst to Dean, Jason Lee places the tape into his bag. NSA decides to get into Dean's life. This is, of course, all caught on camera. And so they think that the incidents must not have been an accident, that the two must have been working together. And so they are on to Dean. They think that Dean is hiding something. They know he's hiding something. But little do they know, Dean also has another tape in his possession that's going to help him in this Polly Pintero mob kingpin case. And so, in essence, this movie is based on a switcheroo, a case of mistaken identities. And the rest of the movie is told with Dean having to run for his life as his life begins to fall apart. His wife and job are both crumbling and falling apart behind his very eyes, and he needs to find out what's going on. So he meets up with this man named Brill, who has been unknowingly helping him throughout his job by providing other little tapes and security footage pieces for him, who tells him that Dean has something that the government wants. Dean and Brill formulate a plan to get Dean's life back and turn the tables back on Reynolds. Is this movie a 1998 Christmas classic? You will just have to find out and watch Enemy of the State.
You know what? I wouldn't be mad at watching this at Christmas like people watch Die Hard.
I wouldn't either. I thought the same thing because we watch Die Hard every year as if it's a Christmas movie, and a lot of people will argue just because something takes place on Christmas doesn't make it a Christmas movie. But I would throw Enemy of the State into the ring. If we're going to be accepting Die Hard as a Christmas movie, I think we should accept Enemy of the State.
Alternative Christmas movies for adults who need a little action.
There you go.
So let's talk about the cast, because I think this plays a big role in why Will did this movie, especially after big bangers like Independence Day and Men in Black, which are choices based on his formula of picking movies that have creatures in them and special effects. We get back to a more serious Will, a Will we haven't really seen since 6 Degrees of Separation. Mm-hmm. So this cast, top-notch, A-list actors and some young, fresh faces that weren't quite where we know them as now, but his partner in crime, Gene Hackman, a legend, new word, legend, a legend in and of himself. This is the movie that I really know Gene Hackman for. I'm sad to say that I can't think of anything else that I've seen him in, and now I'm gonna look at IMDb to be like, oh wait, I've seen that. But he has a ton of well-known movies, and even though I haven't seen them or, don't know of them, he's just one of those people that I feel like that their career is storied or respectable, just based off of seeing him in one thing. You're just like, damn, that's probably. What do you think about Gene Hackman as Lyle Brill?
I thought he played a really great, nerdy conspiracy theory man. Or what would we call those? Like an isolationist, people who live by themselves off the grid, surrounded by loads of technology and security systems. I'm curious to see what other movies Gene Hackman's been in. I know that name, And I know he's been in obviously a lot older films. He's still alive, but he doesn't act anymore. He was born in 1930, so he's about 91 years old. But he was in The Royal Tenenbaums, so I would know him from that Wes Anderson film. But he was in The French Connection, Unforgiven, The Conversation, which I talked about in Roger Ebert's review. But he has, I mean, his character in The Conversation is essentially the same in Enemy of the State, but I liked him. I liked that he was cranky and that basically he was hyperglycemic, so basically he just needs to eat every couple of hours or else he's going to be super cranky, which I can definitely relate to.
They could have threw him in a Snickers commercial. You're not you when you're hungry. I really liked him, and I think that it's a good balance again with like him and Will. Like Will is more straight in terms of like not so comedic in this role than other ones, like Men in Black with Tommy Lee Jones. But it's like a similar kind of chemistry there.
Oh yeah, totally. With the older, like slightly older person, it's not, but it doesn't feel so much of a buddy cop movie because when they first met each other, like Brill really had nothing to do with Dean, and he was like, please leave me alone, leave me out of it. Like, you already got Rachel killed. Like, I don't want to be a part of this. Sorry.
No.
but they do end up teaming up at the end and become, dare I say, friends. So I liked their dynamic duo, and I liked, like how you said with Will Smith, that even the funny lines that he delivered in this film were very straightforward. Almost kind of reminded me of Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black, where Tommy Lee Jones was funny, but like said it so deadpan that you were like, was he serious? Or, oh no, he just told a joke. He said it funny.
Yeah, that's a good note for Will. And your fave, legendary U-turn actor, Jon Voight, and his no spit string this time, no Dr. Pepper, but Jon Voight as Thomas Brian Reynolds. Damn near unrecognizable.
Totally. And Anaconda.
Oh, yes. I know it's 2 movies, but I want to say Blood and Wine. I'm like, no, he's not in Blood and Wine. Of course he's in Anaconda. But it's crazy because we have him in those roles where he plays these very eccentric characters and like, accents and all this stuff, and then in this role he's like as straight-laced as possibly we could get, like business NSA dude, suits, slick back hair, the gold-rimmed glasses, like probably wears suspenders. Like,
totally. And I have a note about suspenders, but
I do too.
But I wouldn't say he was unrecognizable, but I think just by circumstance, the movies that we had seen him in thus far, at least just for this podcast, have been a little bit more eccentric. But he tends to play these kinds of roles of like slimy politicians and stuff. So it's not, I think this kind of character may come, I don't want to say natural to him, but he's definitely played characters like this before. So I thought he was a great asshole because it's not necessarily the government that's the enemy here. And well, Jon Voight arguably is the enemy and the bad guy. He is the enemy of the state. He is the one that's trying to pass this bill and allow us to lose our privacy. And he, as we see as the plot unfolds, will stop at nothing to, get to ruin Will Smith's life and destroy his family's life and ruin his reputation all over a videotape. He'll murder someone. He doesn't care. He goes, oh, you don't like this bill? I'm gonna inject you with this and kill you in front of your dog.
Let's talk about the ladies of the film. Regina King. So Regina King plays Carla Dean, Will and Robert Dean's wife in this movie. And I mean, Regina King at this time probably had just did like Poetic Justice, How Stella Got Her Groove Back. In the Black community, lots of Black people grew up with her on 227 as a kid. So very storied actress, but I feel like this role probably helped with like a switch. And recently too, she's gotten into directing and she's won a ton of awards in the past few years for her acting. So definitely deserving and giving her flowers. But like I think this is like a point in her career where people and her were like skewing serious maybe or seeing potential in her in that way. I think Will had to fight for her to like be considered for this role, and Tony Scott said that he initially didn't really see it, but once he put in his mind that she would wear the pants, he's like, okay, yeah, this could work. Like with Will and Regina as the main couple. So I really liked her performance. I think it's small, but I think there's some great moments in there that you get nuance from her where it's not just like, the naggy, bossy, wear the pants wife. Like when he is on the run and he comes back and is like, look, listen to me. Like this is what's happening. They have a nice like moment where I feel like helped balance that dichotomy of like, her being the one in the relationship that quote unquote wears the pants.
I felt like her character it wasn't just like one kind of mode switch that was turned on. There was duality, there was some softness, sensitiveness, and then also some toughness as well. And so I liked that they showed a bit of a range. Yeah, it's going to be small, but it was bigger than some of the other like wives that Will Smith has had in the past and other movies that he's been in that we've watched so far. So I didn't think necessarily that her character needed more screen time per se, but the time that she did have, I thought had enough range for it to not just be so like one-dimensional.
Yeah, like she economized her screen time in terms of giving us what we needed and a little bit more, and kind of being like, I like this Carla lady.
She's smart.
And then we have Rachel F. Banks, played by Lisa Bonet, who just, I mean, it's hard to talk about her after Regina King because I do love Regina King, but like Lisa Bonet is just one of those women that just has like most people in a chokehold because she's just beautiful. She's like ethereal, like she's mysterious.
Yeah.
Like there's just something about her that you're just immediately like, oh my God. And to see her in a movie, because most people know her from the Cosby Show, and to see her in a movie as an adult and to have her in this kind of serious, but again, small role is a treat, to be honest. I kind of am sad that she didn't really have a big movie career. She's definitely done some notable stuff, but like I'm like, damn, we missed out a lot. Like, what did you think about Lisa Bonet?
She's just cool. She just has one of those really unique, cool looks that I envy. And I think that, resonate with everything that you said about being ethereal and, just so unbelievably pretty, but also a great actress as well. I didn't think her character had enough justice for this film. I think it would have been really cool if her and Will Smith got to pair up more and maybe do have some of those action sequences be together. I mentioned this earlier, spoiler alert, Rachel dies in this movie and she was killed by someone in the NSA who is trying to quiet her because she knows that she's close to Will. Their character, Rachel and Robert Dean had previously dated when they were in college. The plot has revealed that. And so there was some kind of skepticism between Carla and Robert where she trusted him, but like didn't really necessarily like that they got together from time to time to talk about work. And then certainly the NSA used that against Robert to really turn his family against him they kind of made it seem as though they were having more of an affair than what their relationship actually was. And of course, because they talked about like private client information, he couldn't really necessarily like cover that up or really explain too much about the nature of their relationship. But anyways, I felt that Rachel was smart and a very capable person. And I think it would have been cool if they had worked together more, like her and Brill maybe teamed up more, and then the three of them all worked together to try and like save Will Smith's ass by the end of the movie. But I didn't really think that her death was necessary, and it kind of bothered me a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. Well, her and Dean had an affair, so that's why Carla has an issue with them seeing each other, because she's like, you already double dipped back, and now you're seeing her and you're not telling me, so I'm supposed to believe that you're not fucking her again? Okay, that doesn't work. So the skepticism is warranted, and two, like, I just would never trust anybody around Lisa Bonet. But I didn't think about her. I feel like her death was, like, unfortunately, like, unnecessary to the story plot, just because I feel like it motivates Brill to help Dean, and to also Dean figure shit out, because shit got real. He did see Jason Lee's character die, but obviously Rachel's closer to him and someone in his life, and so and the fact that they tried to set him up, like they had stolen his clothes before, and so they had them like strewn around her apartment and like some of his possessions as if he was staying with her or had been there, and so I think that flips the switch in him. I do think it would be a completely different movie if she was along for the ride. And not in a bad way. Like, that would be fun, too. Like, that's an option that I'm okay with. But I wonder, too, because the way she knows Brill is that her dad and him worked together in NSA. And so they made, like, some pact. Like, if you get out, you know, take care of my family. And so I get this sense that she was probably really shielded from like a lot of the stuff that Brill knows and knows how to do. So it'd be cool and helpful if that was the way the movie went, if she actually knew a lot of stuff herself. I feel like he helped her in ways, but like she didn't know exactly what he did or, you know, how and stuff. And it'd be cool if she like was like his little penny to his Inspector Gadget, or, you know, where she knew stuff too and helped out and like stuff like that. But, you know, a good small cameo that was pretty impactful to me. And then we have a bunch of other very familiar faces, which just kind of blows my mind that all of them are in this like little crew together. But a lot of the NSA agents are played by Jack Black, Jamie Kennedy, Seth Green, and then I knew he like looked familiar, but I wasn't sure why. But Jake Busey, who is Gary Busey's son, is also one that gets a decent amount of screen time. So it kind of fits with where they were at in the 90s. You know, they're in their 20s. They look like dudes who would be on the computer doing this kind of stuff, probably.
Yeah.
So.
And there's a special making of Enemy of the State that you can actually find on YouTube. It's about 30 minutes, and they purposefully casted those guys as to be younger, because they say, believe it or not, most people think that, you know, government agencies or the people that are watching you and listening to you are like older balding dudes with the black horn, you know, the guys that look like Gene Hackman with the horn rimmed glasses and stuff. But they could be anyone. They could be college students. And so that was really purposeful when they were casting for this movie. And all of those actors went through like a couple of weeks of specialized training with the technical department for the movie, so that they knew how to properly hold the technology, talk about it, look at it, so that they looked as convincing as possible when interacting with all of their little pieces of equipment.
Yeah, and Tony Scott, I feel like, helped in terms of like wanting a lot of that authenticity, like in terms of doing research and knowing a lot about the stuff. In that, Will Smith talks about the technology and how, you know, you see stuff in movies and that shit's real, and it's like 5 years ahead of like what we have in real time. So that's crazy to think about, especially given the times we live in, where we have computers in our pockets and on our arms. So watch that by all means. It was fun hearing them talk about, like, Jake Busey talks about like how much they had to run in that. And I was like, damn, I never thought about that when you're making an action movie, because he's like, Tony wants to do like multiple takes. And so it's like you just ran down this like block, and then it's like, okay, let's go back and do it again. And it's just like all this constant like action and running, which, it's fun, but, it's very tiring. Like it's the most running I've done on a movie ever. And then you have also Jason Lee, who is dies early on, but a little snack of actor as well, young Jason Lee running around.
There's a lot of people in this film who I felt like could have really taken off in the late 90s, early 2000s, or they were like just about to take off, which I just thought was really kind of perfect how they were casted. Jason Lee, he started off as a skateboarder and then like went into the acting world and stuff, and I don't know where he would have had more success. When you ask me, acting-wise, Jason Lee was in a couple of Kevin Smith films, but I think more famously, a lot of people know him from the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, which are
Or My Name is Earl.
Oh yeah, wasn't that a TV show?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's probably residual-wise something that's probably made him the most money. But like Seth Green, you saw him everywhere around this time. Austin Powers, Idle Hands, MTV. He was just like a very young, funny, quirky, personable dude. Jamie Kennedy ends up having more of a like stand-up comedian career, but it's short-lived. Jack Black obviously took off way more after this movie was made. So it's just really kind of fun to see all of them in these teeny tiny little minor roles. But I felt every time I was watching, or a lot of times when I was watching this movie, it was the Leo actor's point, like, there's like so many recognizable people.
My biggest Leo moment was Anna Gunn of Breaking Bad fame.
She played Jon Voight's wife or something, right?
Yeah, she played Emily Reynolds, but Breaking Bad, if you don't know the actress's name, it's Skyler, Walt's wife. But like, I was like, is that Skyler? Like, and she's younger. Like, I don't know, those moments in watching older movies when you see like familiar people, but they're younger, are just like so, just like, oh my God, like, they're not always who we like are introduced to as whole careers and lives before we may see them. But that's the gist of like at least notable people in the cast to me. Anyone else you can think of, or any other note?
No, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Well, let's talk about Mr. Will Smith.
Yeah. So this is not the first action movie that Will Smith has done, but I feel like out of all of them so far, this movie required the most amount of... Okay, maybe the most comparable movie I would have to this so far would be Bad Boys, because there was a lot of explosions, running, jumping, ducking, dodging throughout the movie. But I felt like this really kind of escalated it more, since he wasn't also doing it side by side with Martin Lawrence. Like, I felt like he was really carrying the majority of some of these stunts. And I really enjoyed that the seriousness of his character. You really saw some like nuance ways of acting. We see lots of different range of being very emotional. And this movie is R-rated, I would say probably mostly because of the cussing. They gratuitously use the F word a lot, which is fuck. I guess we can. But yeah, I thought that for coming off of, I guess, Men in Black, which was more of a comedic role, and then even Enemy of the State, his role was smaller compared maybe to like Jeff stuff.
Oh, you mean Independence Day?
Oh, did I say yeah? Yeah. In Independence Day, his role was a little bit smaller, but then he shared equal screen time in Bad Boys. So I just thought that this allowed, he truly was the star of this movie. I mean, arguably, you can say this co-starring Gene Hackman, who doesn't even appear until an hour into this movie. and then Jon Voight, which will cut down, the movie cuts over to him every now and again. But I really feel like this is Will's movie, and he really carries the majority of it. And I just thought he did a really great job.
Yeah, I had a note when he's meeting with the mobster guys early in the movie. That scene really shows like his natural charisma and kind of like funniness, but like it's crazy how he's able to switch really easy from that to being like really serious. I feel like after that point, like we got the more serious side of him. Bunch of shit pops off. And I didn't think about that until you said it, but like his comedy in this is more straight instead of like, ha ha, funny. It's like, oh, dance. Like, or like, oh, like kind of funny where it's like,
right. Like,
it's funny, but it's serious.
Lingerie store. Are you shopping for your wife? No, I was shopping for me. Sometimes I like to cross dress on the weekends, and you'll never realize how much a pair of edible panties makes you feel really sexy, like.
Which was improvised. So,
really?
like, yes, apparently that was improvised. So he can't really completely shed his goofball self, but the way he that could have skewed very like over the top depending on how he delivered it, and he delivered it in like the right way to be like deadpan-y, sarcastic, funny. And
right.
Even when like he's getting fired from his job, and I got a little triggered a lot of the Oscars because he's like,
I sent that video over. I was like, oh, spicy,
because they're like asking him about his relationship with Rachel, and he's like, do I ask you if you jacked off this morning or blah blah blah, and then he's like, yeah, I don't, because none of my fucking business. And I was just like, oh my god, I felt that.
Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth.
Yes. So like that was just like it. That could be a very comedic conversation in terms of like what they're talking about, but at the same time, like the delivery, just like I don't know, just he understood the assignment.
Yeah, he did, and I think a lot of that has to do with the background character of his role. I think if he wasn't a lawyer, if he was just a regular person that maybe was an accountant or had any other job, then maybe his character might have been a little bit more funny, but then that would have completely changed the tone of this movie. I really think that Tony Scott was going for something that was serious, something that was going to make people feel like uneasy, to think about the government listening in on our conversations and tapping us and bugging us and all of that. So I think that too much comedy would have overplayed the actual message of the movie, and that it might have ended up being lost to a lot of the audiences. So I liked that it was funny without being too funny. And this was, like you said, since 6 Degrees of Separation, probably the most serious movie we've seen.
Yeah, it's like funny in that like nervous, a lot of serious shit's going on is happening, but there's something that is kind of funny, but you're like, oh, like it's still serious, like.
Yeah.
And even Gene Hackman, like the line where they're looking at, or they had hacked into the senator's hotel room or something, and his aide or secretary, very Monica Lewinsky, which 98 was happening. He's cheating basically, and so they're watching the footage of the camera they put in there, and he's like, oh, I don't think you're old enough to watch this. Like, little cheeky moments like that, to be British, very cheeky,
very
with
cheeky.
the comment. I think, too, Will is very grown by this movie. He's, like, 29. And I think even in Men in Black, he has this boyish quality to him. And I don't know if that's just the comedic part of him, because it just skews, like, younger and being funny in those kind of ways sometimes. But, like, this is, like, grown man Will Smith by now. Like, this is the Will Smith I can foresee in, Pursuit of Happiness and I Am Legend, stuff like that, I, Robot. Whereas Bad Boys, Independence Day, Men in Black those are Will's, I can still picture like him on the Fresh Prince. By now, like suspenders and all and overcoats and stuff, I'm just like, hey, okay, Will. Like, so I think that also attributes to like at this point in his life, I think was just the right time to kind of make that shift.
Agreed. And now you and I had some thoughts on suspenders. Do you want to share your thoughts?
Let me see what I remember that I was just thinking, like, we talked about what he wore in Men in Black pre his Men in Black suit. And, it's very street hip hop, but shiny 90s, like, And so I love that. But again, it harkens me to, like, Fresh Prince. Like, he would wear Timbs on the Fresh Prince. That makes sense. He would probably wear those ugly motorcycle-looking pants on the Fresh Prince. But this, we're getting Men in Black, we get suit Will, but it's like very uniform, very plain. This, we're getting like tailored suit Will. Like, we're getting tailored overcoats, suspenders again, which just made me think of like The West Wing and like, those shows where again, you're in like DC, Baltimore area. And I don't know. It did something. I was just like, oh, like, you don't see that often anymore.
You don't. And what I noted was, with the exception of Larry King, I just find
the suspenders king. Like,
the suspenders king. I find suspenders on men like kind of attractive. And it's a lost art. You don't really see it much these days. I ironically tried to wear them as a fashion statement in middle school. And, in the days of low-rise pants, it helps a little bit trying to keep those pants from revealing too much of a butt crack. But I love suspenders. I wouldn't be mad if they came back.
I think there's two types of suspenders. Not to go on a suspenders tangent, but I didn't realize that I too had a moment with suspenders and I think really this is just like a Spirit Day thing because of Nerd Day being such a big thing, like, come our generation. So a lot of us hearkened suspenders back to Steve Urkel and his nerdiness in terms of that, and maybe like Revenge of the Nerds and stuff. But like, so you have like those suspenders, where it's like you're, pulling your pants up, high waters, they're tight, maybe they're colorful. And then you have suspenders that, like, these suspenders that are giving you like Law and Order and Larry King and
Are you
West
serving
Wing.
Nerd? Are you serving Law and Order? What are
And then we still got another category of suspenders. We have work wear suspenders, like like guys who do logging and stuff like that, where they've got the heavy duty suspenders with the Carhartts and like the flannels, and so
maybe a pair of Timbs.
Yes.
Pair of good work boots.
Red Wings,
some like plaid
boots. Yes.
I'm thinking of the Brawny Man, essentially.
I used to watch like logging shows on, I don't know if it's on Discovery Channel or like one of those channels, but so yeah, there's a variety of suspenders, and these are like the classy 50 Shades of Grey kind of suspenders, not the Urkel. I'm just saying, like, they're sexy. They're not like nerdy and like cheesy.
Yeah. Okay, I agree.
And then like the workwear ones are like Magic Mike suspenders, where you're like, woo, yes, construction worker, take it off. Like, okay. I also, talking about fashion moments though, like, I love a good winter coat. So like his coat game in this movie was strong, and two, his beanie game was also elite. I was like, woo, hello, I like this. And I think too, I remember like pictures of him, like I want to say like Bad Boys 2, like in the 2000s, of him, those type of beanies again, and like the clear shade, the tinted shades that are now trendy again. So yes, Will looks great in mostly anything, really. So
yeah.
But he wore a beanie to like one of the premieres and like a puffy vest, and I was like, oh my god, this is so 90s and casual. But
yes. Well, wait till next week because I do declare that there's going to be some like 1800s versions of suspenders and vests.
See, workwear. See,
Some
to the
gold rush
period.
suspenders.
Oh, speaking non-will, but speaking of fashion too, I wear yellow tint glasses for work because I sit in front of this insanely
Yeah.
bright fluorescent light in my cubicle. But Seth Green's yellow glasses, like chef's
Beautiful.
kiss, like, and they were everywhere in the 90s, like
They
those
were.
blue, red.
Hmm.
Johnny Depp still wears glasses like that.
Oh, yeah.
Bono. Um, but but yeah, they're like gamer glasses
Yeah.
essentially now. But props to Seth Green for his little fashion moment in the movie. Him
Mhm.
and the glasses and the spiky hair.
Yes, so much hair gel holding that up.
What else? Oh, this isn't fashion, but like I did notice his BMW because I was like, that is also the Pierce Brosnan 007 BMW. So
Oh.
that BMW, tiny little special place in my BMW owner heart. And it adds to the like lawyer appeal of it all. And I think they had a Range Rover when like him and Regina were driving and they were talking about Janet
Yeah.
Jackson. And I was like, that is like my, I don't know if I've been brainwashed by movies and TV, but that is like the elite, like we've made it car combo. Is like a BMW and a Range Rover, a la
Totally.
the OC as well. Sandy Cohen had the BMW, Kirsten had the Range Rover. So, anything else though about Will specifically, and we can talk about other moments in the movie that we liked or stuff that we had questions.
Not so much. Like I said, the physical stunts and chases that Will went through for this movie are really, were just, I don't want to say different from his work so far, but just elevated more to more of that practical effects. There's a moment where him and Gene Hackman are escaping again, another NSA chase, and they're driving Gene Hackman's car and they're driving in between two like oncoming trains and their car is partially on fire. And again, that was one of those moments where I looked down for 2 seconds and looked back up and was like, Will Smith is on fire again, because there was the other fire that broke out in the hotel room, which that scene was really funny to me because when he goes in, he pretends to be like a service manager and like was asking the couple in the room how they like their stay, and then they were saying that like, oh, your clothes are bugged and you have to like take your clothes off and stuff, and so he starts to unrobe and the wife who's sitting on the bed was like, oh, like a little excited because she thought like he was a stripper.
And the husband's just like, and they look like they were like a Asian foreign couple, so like it didn't seem like they may have understood English that well because they just seemed like what's going on and like no comprehension. And so the reaction of her seeing him take off the clothes was like, oh, okay, this is what it is.
Oh, okay, I get it now. That's
and
what
I think she tried to grab like some money from her.
She did. She started grabbing some singles to like. So again, like it wasn't as sticky, like slapsticky funny, but that's a subtle like funny moment. But then again, like immediately jumps back into the seriousness. And there was some good practical stunts in there. Lighting people on fire in a movie is not as hard, and it's still dangerous. You're always working with fire, but of course, like their clothes and stuff are going to be soaked in some kind of like fire retardant type of material. But yeah, Will really did, have that, or like go through with that. And I loved also too, right when he comes out of the hotel room and he's in the robe, it's the cover that's on the Jet magazine. And he goes into kind of like an overpass tunnel and narrowly escapes getting hit by a car, and then like hoists himself up into like up a ladder, and then like lifts off a manhole cover and then escapes back out onto the street. Like it's really it lowered my suspension of disbelief just a little bit because that wasn't his background and training of a person. I was like, this is a really smart lawyer. Kind of like what Gene Hackman said. Like, you're either the smartest person or the dumbest person I've ever met. Or just lucky. Extremely, extremely lucky.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit like, this movie just felt like so fast paced and so in your face constantly that it did feel a little overwhelming at times. But even with that being said, I still felt like Will carried so much of this movie and made so much of it work.
And allegedly Tom Cruise actually done this, so.
And that would make sense too. Talk about a person that does his own stunts, whether to his own safety or not. Even when people say, no, Tom, you really don't have to do that. And he's like, no.
Yeah, so I think obviously we really enjoyed his performance, but let's get into some of the things about this movie. Maybe we were just like, or just like, oh my God, I really enjoyed that. For me, initially, I'm just like, their whole approach to getting the tape was just all wrong to start off with. Like, because at one point they go to his house and they're like, oh, hey, can we talk to you? And he thinks it's about the guy that Jason Lee plays who died. And he's like, oh, well, I don't really have much to say about that. Like, I didn't see much. And he's like, no, it's about something else. And they have all this technology that they figure out the drop and stuff that happens and that something was placed in his bag. And I just feel like it's also like very obvious that he didn't know that happened, Yes. So they go in with this attitude of like, well, they do ask him, it's like, well, maybe he gave you, like, maybe there's something that you don't know he gave you or something. And I'm just like, but you guys know that he did give him something. So, like, just, like, be like, look, we know he dropped off something to you, maybe unbeknownst to you, but we need to search or, like, we need to look for it. Something. I just felt like it was just, like, they knew too much to be like, okay, well, let's play it safe. Maybe he's going to lie to us. Like, he has it. Or that, like, maybe he didn't know that he had it. So, like, just be upfront with him. And then he would be like, oh, shit, I didn't know he dropped something. Or, like, if they played the video for him and, like, see, like, he dropped something in your bag. Did you notice anything? Like, then you would be like, okay, you're lying. Because clearly, we see it. So, obviously, you're in on it. Okay, great. Now we can fuck up your life. Because the level that they went to, like, get this thing, but also fucking destroyed his life, I was just like, there had to have been a better way.
But it also didn't help because they said the tape. And so Will thought that they were talking about the mafia tape. And so when he later goes to see Rachel again, he's like, dude, ever since you gave me that tape, like, my life's got, like, really fucked up. Like, what's so special about that tape? So as a viewer, it's a little frustrating because you're like, oh, I wish I could just jump into the screen and be like, no, they're talking about this tape. Your tape is actually not the one that they're after. So they made this entire plot work based off of not a mistaken identity, but an old switcheroo, and it's lost on both parties, both on the NSA and I don't want to keep on calling them by their actors' names. So, like, it's lost on both the NSA and, like, Reynolds, played by Jon Voight, and on Dean's characters, that they both know that they're talking about a tape, but they're talking about two completely different things. So, yeah, that was a little frustrating and infuriating. And the only part, I believed the satellite stuff. Oftentimes when I talk about movies review, that this movie is brought to you in part by this movie is brought to you in part by beep 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 beep, and like satellites just roaming around and like Morse code, like technology sounds is what this movie is brought to you in part by. But there's that moment where Jack Black's character is pulling up the video surveillance footage inside the lingerie store.
Yes.
And they're like, okay, stop that, rotate that 360 and zoom in and then flip it this way. And it's like they're making this shitty surveillance footage looking like this high def VR image, and that's like the one thing that you can't do. Like that kind of technology does not exist. Yes, we can read license plates. Yes, we can try and like clear a fuzzy image, but you cannot rotate something 360 degrees around and then try to like clear up the image and then zoom into the package and then, oh, see, look how the coloration here and it's different, as if that there's a videotape and stuff. That was
Yeah,
crazy.
that part I was just like, that is just not possible. Like probably still to this day, because to the way that they like achieve that, it looks like 3D modeling.
Yeah.
And like that's creatable, absolutely. But in terms of like pulling something from video footage to then like be like observe it in 360 degrees, like that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like, so I was just like, lost me on that one. Like, but I'm trying to think of other technology moments that may have not been like 100%. I think he definitely in 2022, you know better than to like call from a payphone. Well, there's no payphones, but you know better than to call somebody, hopefully, if
Yeah.
you're running from people, you know? Because now you don't even need to get a hold of someone's phone to probably tap it. Like, it's just, you know, if you know how to hack or if you can get access via like your cell phone carriers, because that tends to be most people's phone. So like when he called Carla's like office to tell her friend, like, and then they wound up tracking him to the convenience store, I was just like, ooh, yeah, probably wouldn't do that. But I'm trying to think what else.
There just was a lot of, I don't want to say confusing technology, but there was Seth Green and Jamie Kennedy's van that they were watching, and then there was like Jack Black's office, which was, I think, where like Jon Voight's home base was, and then the two of them were talking to each other. So that you had like basically your eagle eye view of everything that was happening and tracking, like, okay, going into this store and then going over here. So with all of these people watching and tracking and knowing exactly where you are, it just kind of dumbfounded me again, like how he was able to go through so many days in a row without actually having to be caught. And so this movie reminded me a lot of The Fugitive, which was another Tommy Lee Jones movie, and Harrison Ford, where Harrison Ford was framed for murder. They thought that he had murdered his wife and he was convicted, but his like prison bus ends up being overturned, and so he escapes with a couple other prisoners. And so Tommy Lee Jones is like this like kind of hound dog investigator man that's like really good at tracking people down. And they do say that in the making of this film, how The Fugitive really inspired a lot of the chase scenes and stuff, but that it, to me, it just felt a little like frustrating that no one was able to actually like capture him. Not that I wanted him to, but like, you know, there's this scene when they got after Gene Hackman's like base, and fuck it, I'm just gonna call them by their actors because I don't care anymore. But like Gene Hackman like blew up his own base camp after they escaped because they knew that they were onto him. They tracked him down through that cell phone or the phone booth call, and then the two of them like dodge in between those train tracks, and then that's it. Like they're off their trail again. It's like, well, there's the helicopter watching them. Like you can call more squad cars and backup to like surround the train track area. And
well,
then
no, they were tracking them after that point with the helicopter, but they went under a highway pass and they stole that Mercedes, and that's when they lost.
yeah, and yeah, I guess at that point they had gotten rid of all of their tapped bugs and stuff. But again, you wouldn't think that with all of their technology that they're watching, if they would see like, oh look, this car drove under this underpass and stopped for a minute and then made its way out. Like, that's suspicious. Let's track that car.
Yeah, that's when the movie just probably has to move.
Again, you're right. And at that point, it was kind of wrapping up towards its grand finale anyways, which I really liked the ending. That's kind of what saved it for me, was that they do end up being captured and they are taken into the surveillance van where they had been watched this whole time. And Will kind of has this genius plan last minute to say, okay, you want the videotape? I have the videotape. And he takes them to the Italian restaurant where the mob boss was. And again, it's that classic thing of mob boss thinks that Will's talking about the videotape in question that they had talked about in the beginning of the movie, and the other team thinks that they're talking about the murder videotape, and neither of them are making the connection that they're talking about two very different things. And then it ends up in this big shootout, which the filming of that was chaotic to me because it was so shaky. It just felt like someone was like doing this the entire time, which really bothered me. But yeah, I thought that was a really clever way to bring those two storylines in together and end up making it really work. Because as soon as they walked into the restaurant, I was like, like, as I think as an audience member, you get kind of excited of like, I think I know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I liked the ending, but I also I don't know, I feel like it was abrupt in some ways too. Like the ending though was like very Charlie's Angels to me in a weird way because, he's like at home and the TV is showing him obviously on a camera of some sort, and so he's like, uh-oh. But then it cuts to like footage of Brill like on a beach or something, and then he's like, oh, you need to put some sun on those things or something. So that was like a good cheeky like goodbye, like I'm watching you, or like I could watch you, or like hope you're doing good. But how it all wrapped up, was like really satisfying and stuff. But for the most part, like my suspension of disbelief was pretty like well maintained, especially considering that this movie is 1998, bordering 30-ish, well, not 30-ish, 20 something years. I feel like too, especially with what we know about technology and stuff now, like it really holds its own. So shall we talk about that? Like,
totally.
Does it hold up?
Absolutely.
Could this be remade?
Absolutely. And I kind of am surprised that it hasn't been remade with newer technology, newer gadgets. I wonder if something like this might be in the works, but companies like Apple or Google would want to, stop it because they don't want people to know what we already kind of know, that our phones track us. I mean, you can talk about Haribo gummy bears and my phone's going to pick that up. And the next thing I know, then I'm going to be seeing ads for Haribo gummy bears on Amazon or whatever. Like, you might like to try Haribo gummy bears. Because I do know in the making of this movie that the NSA like wanted nothing to do with it and were really kind of pissed that they were sticking with this storyline. So a lot of the filming for this took place in Maryland and not necessarily Washington, D.C. And that was kind of their way to get around it, which makes you think they were probably onto something. But I think this movie could definitely be remade in 2022. And I know that there are conspiracy theorists out there, or at least paranoid enough people out there that would be fearful of a movie like this kind of coming out. And it definitely opens up a bigger discussion. So I wonder if adults leaving this film in 98 were like, wow, do you think that that's possible? And like that really happens. But it did happen after 9/11 with the Freedom Act. And, ever since then, I think our nation has become extremely fearful of another potential of another terrorist attack, and
Big Brother became like a huge what do you call those things, like words that just start turning up in the zeitgeist all the time. Be careful. Absolutely. Big Brother's
yeah, people used to say that shit all the time, like, be careful what you do, Big Brother's always watching. Or they would just chalk that up to those like fluke incidences of like, oh yeah, I said this one thing, and then now it's like all coming up in my feed of like, oh, Big Brother, like, watch how you send off your emails, Big Brother's reading them.
And now it's the FBI and the FBI agent in your camera watching.
That's exactly it. I wrote that down in my notes. And that's really what Jack Black's character reminded me of like the FBI agent who's assigned to all of us. And I'm like, oh, Simone's on her 4th bowl of Reese's Puffs. She's really deep down in this John Bonet crime spree tonight. Like, girl, you need to wash your hair. It looks like you haven't washed it in a few days. As I'm like,
yeah, because like they at some point have cameras in the Dean household, so we see like Carla, Regina King in the kitchen and stuff, and it's just like mundane stuff, but you know, they're hoping something happens. They're really hoping he like turns back up, but I can't imagine watching like footage of that. And again, like when people say the FBI agent and stuff, I'm just like, fortunately for me, I'm not one of those people doing anything of interest to watch me for a very long time. So, I mean, I hope they enjoy seeing me like lay in bed all day and watch Netflix or like tweet or
like... He's like, oh, she's watching Made in Manhattan again. I'm going to watch with her. I love this movie too.
Or maybe they watch us when we record the podcast and they're like, ooh, I'm getting the scoop before the episode.
Well, you know what? If that's the case, then you better buy our merch, bitch. If you're going to be reaping the benefits of our show before everybody else does, you can support our podcast. Visit Redbubble.
This movie does remind me, too, of... I saw Minority Report in theaters when I was a kid.
Wasn't that Tom Cruise?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's very futuristic technology, government entity or something stuff. I should rewatch that because I don't really remember. That was another double feature for me because I saw 8-Legged Freaks and that, I think. So,
wow, what a combo.
Right. But yeah, I definitely think that this could be remade easily for sure. And then I think, though, that it's amazing that this holds up, like, where it's not, like, super outdated or it doesn't feel, like, current. Like, I feel like they wouldn't have to change much to update it. The only thing that would really be obviously different would be, like, the cell phones. There were even cell phones at this point. So, and there were computers. It's different than, like, probably if we watch the French Connection or the Conversation. The Conversation, where it's like stark, like
that one was more just, so I haven't seen it, but like I did watch some clips and stuff. That one's more of like the phone tapping stuff. We'd have the phone board, the wire board, and like plugging into different stuff and listening through there. So obviously that movie shows its time. But I think that if someone watched this, besides the cell phones and the computers, there really wasn't that gave it too much away to show its age. So I still think it totally holds its own in today's age.
What you drinking while you're running on the run?
You know, this one was kind of tough, but Will did get something taken from his house when the NSA raided it and bugged it, and he kept on talking about it, and that was his blender. He goes, some people do yoga, some people meditate, I blend. And I think because it was so important to him, I would say my cocktail would be some kind of a blended drink, some kind of a boozy smoothie, maybe a pina colada, and that is a snack and a drink both in one.
That is, because if there's a pineapple wedge in there, boom, snack.
What about you?
On the fly, I just keep looking at, this glorious color behind me, and I really want a blue drink, but I also, want it to be on fire. So, I don't know how that works, but I'm a visual person. I'm not as diligent as Simone in terms of looking up drinks or knowing alcohol combos that would work, but it would need to be a lovely shade of, this blue, and then at some point, just a little, fire moment for, the explosions of it all and whatnot. So, and it'd be cool if it came in a glass where it was etched with computery code stuff.
That would be cool.
Next
See,
level.
You got your souvenir cup.
Snack wise, I don't. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a snack, but maybe a granola bar since he's on the run. Something quick, something easy. Edible panties.
There you go. Edible panties. Nothing like a little candy necklace.
I was going to say that the drink could come with edible panties and you put it in the drink and it disintegrates and adds to the flavor of the drink. That's a side secret order. You're with the,
with a side of edible panties.
Oh my god, that's funny. But yeah. I do have one note. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I am Will when Carla is watching the news and talking about the privacy issues and stuff. I'm let them people worry about it. Like, and then I thought it was super boss move of Lisa Bonet's character Rachel to when they meet again post like his life starting to fall apart, she's like, you know, I'm in love with a married man, like, you know, it's not. And then he's like, well, I mean, and she's like, what makes you think it's you? And I was just like, oh, she had him sweating, like he was in the corner like, what? Like,
yeah, there's nothing I can do about that. What makes you think it's you?
Oh, I was just like, oh my God, she's such a boss. Because I was like, oh my God, it's not him. Like, it's so believable. It's not one of those mistresses where she's like completely just hanging on to this dude. Yeah. And she's obviously very capable of pulling other dudes. So I loved that aspect of that.
Yeah, like, it seems like Will needed her more than she needed him, to be honest.
Ooh. And for that reason, she didn't deserve to die. But
agreed.
Oh, and then the line where he's like, this is all happened because you made a fucking phone call. Like, that, it stood out. Because it's in the trailer, too, I think. Like, like this is all happened because you made a phone call. Like, just one phone call. Which makes me think of the movie, is it Cellular? I don't know, it's with...
I think it's called The Call.
Where Phone Booth.
Phone Booth, yeah. He's in a phone booth the entire time.
And then there's the movie with Chris Evans where it's like the cell phone and he's on the phone with Kim Basinger and he can't hang up. Tech movies, I love it. Okay, anyways, I'll shut up and we'll wrap this thing up. Put some Morse code on this bitch and satellite out. I'm going to try to find something that sounds like that or just straight pull it from the movie because who cares? Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and to the people who've stuck with us so far, please come back for another episode of the Backyard NSA sideshow of Inside the Actor Studio. We're hacking you, Mr. James Lib.
But seriously, if you like us enough to stick around, take another deep dive down this IMDb rabbit hole as we time travel to the Wild Wild West, where we're going to talk about Will Smith in the 1999 movie Wiki Wiki Wild, Wiki Wiki Wild Wild. And we're going to have some special guests on the show. I'm not going to spoiler alert it yet, so tune in. There will be a few folks who will be joining Bria and I next week, so we're very excited about that.
And on that note, if you've got nothing better to do, go figure out a theme to go hack and watch a bunch of movies you've never seen.
I'm your host, Simone. Subscribe to this blessed mess. Leave us a like if you are into it. I'm talking about you, Jeff, my FBI agent. If you're going to be listening, you better subscribe.
I thought you were talking about Jeff Goldblum.
Oh, you too, Jeff. Listen, have your people call my people. We'll make it happen.
And I'm your host, Bria, and it would be awesome for you to wipe off those buttery hacker popcorn fingers before you start typing away. And give us a review. Follow us at Roll Call Pod on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and my favorite, Twitter. And if you feel like it, you want to rep the podcast, you want to buy a JLo shirt, and then eventually maybe some Will stuff, go check us out on Redbubble, get some merch. But yeah, help the indie podcast out. And on that note, this has been another episode of
Roll Call.